I used to believe that if you did the work, quietly, consistently, people noticed. Not applause, not trophies. Just the simple assumption that when something mattered, your name was attached to it. That the company knew who kept the lights on when nobody was watching. For 11 years, I was the person they called when a process broke and nobody could explain why. Not because I was a genius, because I was the one who stayed late, read the vendor contracts, checked the audit trails, and wrote the boring documentation everyone promised they'd do. Later never came. I did it anyway. That Tuesday started like any other. Coffee that tasted like burnt plastic from the break room machine. A calendar packed with meetings that should have been emails. A Slack message from my director, Mark, telling me to jump on a quick call at 4:15. No agenda, no subject line. Just quick call. I didn't panic. After all, Mark had done that before. He liked surprise check-ins. He liked the feeling of control, dropping a meeting on your calendar like a paperweight and watching you adjust your day around it. At 4:15, I joined. HR was already there. Not my usual HR contact, the one who at least pretended to be human. This was a different woman, a name I didn't recognize. Camera off, voice flat. The kind of voice that tells you she's reading off a document she didn't write and doesn't want to be responsible for. Mark's camera was on. He looked comfortable, like he'd already eaten dinner in his head. The HR rep started with the scripted sentence everyone dreads. Due to organizational restructuring, your position is being eliminated effective today. I stared at the screen, waiting for the second sentence. The part where they explain the actual reason, the part where you learn what you did wrong, or who complained, or what changed. But there was nothing. No performance concerns. No, this isn't about you. No fake sympathy. Just silence, like the line was the whole point. I asked the only thing that made sense. Okay, what's the transition plan? Who's taking over my systems and vendor escalation? HR paused like I'd asked something inappropriate. Mark answered instead. His tone was almost casual. We'll figure it out. I felt my jaw tighten. Mark, I run the approvals on the logistics payment queue. I'm listed as the final reviewer for 3 regions. If you shut my access off today, that stops. He gave me a small smile, the kind that says he enjoys the fact that you're right and it doesn't matter. Then he said it. You're replaceable. Not shouted, not angry, just stated, like a fact in a report. I remember how my hands went cold, not from fear, from the sudden, sharp realization that this wasn't a hard decision for him, that he'd rehearsed that line, or maybe he'd said it to other people before me. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I asked HR for the separation documents and the exact wording for position eliminated. I asked what date my benefits ended. I asked who to contact for my personnel file. Because once you hear a sentence like that, you have 2 choices. You can react emotionally and give them a story where you're the problem, or you can stay calm and start collecting facts. HR promised an email within an hour. Mark said nothing. He just watched me, waiting for a crack. I didn't give him one. I thanked them for their time. I ended the call. I sat there for a full minute, staring at my own reflection in the dark laptop screen. Then the practical part of my brain turned on. I knew how offboarding worked at my company. When someone with elevated access gets terminated, procurement, finance ops, systems roles, there's a standard sequence. IT disables accounts. Security reviews access logs. Internal audit verifies there weren't outstanding approvals or unusual transactions attached to the employee's credentials. It's routine. Most of the time it's a formality, but not always. And that's what people like Mark never understood. The company doesn't just erase you. It leaves a trail. It creates a checklist, and checklists don't care about ego. At 4:42, my laptop kicked me out of the VPN. Email logged out. Slack disconnected. That was expected. At 4:53, my phone buzzed with an automated text from our identity system. Your account recovery options have been updated. If this wasn't you, contact security. I frowned. Updated? By who? I hadn't touched my recovery settings in years, and I sure as hell wasn't logged in anymore. I opened my notebook, an actual paper notebook, because I never trusted that company to preserve anything I'd need later. Inside were dates, meeting notes, vendor names, escalation paths, and the kind of details nobody thinks matter until they matter a lot. I wrote one line at the top of a fresh page, terminated 4:17 p.m. Mark present, HR rep unknown, replaceable. Then I wrote the text message timestamp underneath it. At 5:06, another buzz. This time it wasn't automated. A voicemail notification. Unknown number. No transcription, just the audio. I pressed play. A man's voice, professional, careful. Hi, this is Daniel from Internal Audit. We need to ask you a few questions regarding approvals and account activity associated with your role. Please call me back tonight, if possible. Internal Audit, not HR, not IT. Audit doesn't call you tonight unless something is already wrong. And in that moment, sitting in my silent apartment with my company access cut off and Mark's voice still in my ears, I realized something that made my stomach drop. They didn't just fire me. They fired me at the exact moment they needed my name to disappear from a trail. I called Daniel back within 5 minutes. Not because I was eager, because when Internal Audit calls you after hours and says tonight, it means the question isn't if something happened. It's how bad it is and who's going to get blamed for it. He picked up on the second ring. Thanks for calling back, he said. Calm voice. Corporate calm. The kind people use when they're trying not to spook you. No problem, I answered. What's going on? A pause. Not long, but intentional. We're conducting a standard offboarding review, he said. Your role had elevated approval permissions. There are a few items we need to validate. Standard? Sure. I leaned back in my chair and kept my voice even. Okay. Ask. First, he said, do you still have access to your email or approval dashboard? No, I said. VPN kicked me out around 4:40. Everything went dark. Another pause. That's consistent, he said. Second, did you make any changes to your account recovery options today? My eyes flicked to the text message on my phone. No, I said, and I got a security notification saying recovery options were updated after I was terminated. The line went silent for a beat. Not dead, just quiet, like he muted himself to think. Can you forward that notification? He asked. I can screenshot it, I said. Where do I send it? I can't access company email. We have a secure intake portal, he said. I'll text you the link. He did. I opened it and uploaded the screenshot. Then he asked a question that told me exactly where this was headed. Do you recall approving any unusually large vendor payments in the last 30 days? Particularly any expedited or manual override items? My mouth went dry, because yes, I remembered. Not one, 3, all to the same vendor. A third-party logistics contractor named Northgate Fulfillment, a company we'd used for overflow shipping during peak season. The invoices had looked normal at first glance. Warehousing, last-mile delivery, seasonal labor, boring line items, familiar language. But the approvals were odd. They weren't routed through the usual queue. They came through as expedites, marked urgent, and they hit my desk late, always end of day. At the time, I'd assumed the pressure was real. We were drowning in backlog, and Mark had been screaming in meetings about avoiding penalties and not missing holiday delivery windows. So I'd approved them. But I had done it with conditions. I remembered because I'm not careless, and I don't sign my name to anything I can't justify later. I approved 3 expedites for Northgate, I said, but each time I documented the reason and requested the supporting SOW and service logs. Daniel exhaled, like he'd been waiting for me to say those exact words. Did you receive the supporting documentation? He asked. Not fully, I admitted. Mark told me it was coming. He said finance had it. He said procurement had it. Same story every time. And who requested the expedite? Daniel asked. I didn't even have to think. Mark, I said. He pushed them through as urgent. Another silence. Then Daniel's voice lowered slightly, still professional, but different now, more direct. I'm going to be transparent with you, he said. Those Northgate payments are what triggered the review. What do you mean? I asked. We have a control in place, he said, that flags repeat expedited approvals outside the standard workflow, especially if the approver is terminated shortly after. I felt my stomach twist. Shortly after? I repeated. Daniel didn't answer immediately, and that told me the truth was ugly. Your termination today, he said carefully, created an exception case. The system flagged it automatically. The room felt smaller, because suddenly, replaceable sounded less like an insult and more like a strategy. I kept my voice steady. So you think they fired me to clean up the trail? I'm not saying that, Daniel said in the exact tone people use when they absolutely are saying that. He continued. What we need from you is context. Any emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, anything showing who directed those payments, who pressured you, and whether you raised concerns. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Of course, they wanted emails and Slack messages, the one thing I no longer had access to. They cut my access, I said. I can't pull internal communications. I know, Daniel replied. That's why I'm calling you personally. We're trying to preserve evidence before it's altered. Altered, so Audit wasn't just looking. They were worried someone would delete things. That's when I remembered the recovery settings text message again. The one that hit after I was already locked out. I swallowed. Daniel, I said, if someone changed my recovery settings after termination, that means they were inside my identity profile. Yes, he said quietly. And that's not something we can ignore. My mind started moving fast now, because I wasn't just a guy who got fired. I was an approver on paper, a name on a trail, a convenient target if anything blew up. And if Mark was smart, which he thought he was, he'd already started building the narrative. Incompetent employee. Rushed approvals. Lack of judgment. Termination justified. It would be simple. It would be believable. Unless I could prove the pressure came from above. I stood up and walked to my closet, pulled out the cardboard folder I kept for work stuff, and laid it on the table. Inside were printouts of key vendor agreements, screenshots of routing paths, notes from meetings where Mark had pushed for speed over process. Because I'd learned something years ago, the people who talk about teamwork the loudest are usually the first to throw you under the bus. I flipped through the folder until I found it. My own handwritten note from 2 weeks earlier. Northgate expedite and number 3. Mark says approve now, docs later. And beneath it, one more line I'd written without thinking. If this blows up, it won't be me. I stared at that sentence for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and called Daniel back. I have notes, I said. Not emails, but notes. Dates, times, and who told me what. There was a pause. Then Daniel said very simply, that helps more than you think. And then he added, like he was almost warning me, but that was just the beginning. Daniel's portal wasn't some casual, send me what you have situation. It was a formal intake page with a case number, a confidentiality warning, and a checkbox that basically said, you understand this may become part of an internal investigation. That word, investigation, hit differently when you're the one who just got labeled replaceable. I sat at my kitchen table with the folder open, my phone beside it, and a legal pad that was already filling up with timelines. Not feelings, not opinions, dates, times, names, approval IDs. Because if Mark was trying to build a story where I was careless, then my only defense was the same thing that had kept me employed for 11 years. Process. I started with what I knew was concrete. The 3 Northgate expedite approvals. The exact days they hit my queue. The times Mark called or messaged me right before each one. The fact that I requested supporting documentation each time. The fact that it never arrived. I pulled up my personal email and searched my inbox for calendar invites. I learned a long time ago to forward certain meetings to myself, mostly because my wife and I shared a schedule, and I didn't like pretending work owned my entire life. Those forwarded invites were still there. Quick sync, Northgate, one subject line read. 2 weeks ago, Mark as organizer, there were 3 of them. I didn't feel relief, I felt cold clarity. Because if those invites existed, then the pressure wasn't in my head. It was documented. I uploaded screenshots of the invites into Daniel's portal, along with photos of my handwritten notes. Then I wrote a short statement, 1 page, tight language, no drama, explaining exactly what happened and what I requested. When I finished, my hands were steady. That's when my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was my old coworker in accounts payable, Maya. We weren't close friends. We were work close. The kind of people who trust each other with facts, not gossip. I stared at her name on the screen for a second before answering, like the universe was giving me a choice. Then I picked up. "Hey," I said. Maya didn't waste time. "Are you okay?" she asked. I heard. "I'm fine," I said. "What's going on?" Her breath caught, quiet, controlled. "People are freaking out," she said. Audit and security were on our floor. Like, real security. Not the guys who badge visitors. My stomach tightened. "What are they saying?" I asked. "They're not saying much," she replied. But they pulled invoice packets. They pulled approval trails. And they asked about Northgate. There it was again. Northgate wasn't a vendor anymore. It was a fuse. I kept my voice low. "Did they mention my name?" Maya hesitated. "They asked if you ever complained about those payments," she said. "If you ever refused." I almost laughed. Again, not because it was funny, but because it was so clean, so simple. If they couldn't prove who orchestrated it, they'd ask who could have stopped it. And the easiest person to blame is the one who's already gone. "I documented concerns," I said, multiple times. "I figured," Maya whispered. "Listen, there's something else." I stood up without realizing it. "What?" I asked. Maya's voice dropped. "Last month, Northgate updated their banking details," she said. "New account, new routing. It got pushed through fast." That wasn't normal. Vendor banking changes are supposed to be slow, controlled, verified. People get fired for mishandling that. "Who approved the change?" I asked. Maya paused. "It shows your approval as the final reviewer," she said. The room went silent. I felt that sensation behind my ribs. The one that isn't panic, exactly. It's the moment your brain accepts that you're not dealing with incompetence. You're dealing with intent. "I never approved a banking change," I said slowly. "I know," Maya replied. "That's why I called you." I looked down at my phone and the earlier text message about recovery options came back into my mind like a knife sliding into place. If someone changed my recovery settings after termination, then someone had tried to get inside my identity profile. And if they did that, they could have done more than just mess with recovery options. They could have tried to use my credentials, my approvals, my name. "Maya," I said, "do you still have access to the banking change request?" There was a beat. "I can't send anything official," she said quickly, "but I can tell you what it says. The change request was submitted by someone in procurement. It lists Mark as the business justification contact." Of course it did. Mark wasn't stupid. He wasn't messy. He was the type of manager who stayed clean by keeping other people's fingerprints on the glass. I thanked Maya and hung up. Then I called Daniel immediately. He answered, same calm voice. "I just learned something important," I said. "Northgate's banking details were updated last month, and the system shows my final approval, but I never did it." The pause this time was longer. Then Daniel spoke carefully. "Can you repeat that?" he asked. I repeated it word for word. Daniel exhaled. "Okay," he said. "That changes the scope." "How?" I asked. "It means this isn't just an approval issue," he said. It's potentially an identity control issue. I swallowed. Meaning someone used my profile. Or attempted to, Daniel said. We have to treat it as possible credential compromise. I didn't ask the question that was sitting on my tongue. I didn't need to. I already knew who the compromise benefited. Daniel continued. I'm putting a legal hold on all relevant communications, he said. Email, Slack, approvals, vendor master data, and access logs. Security is already imaging certain machines. Imaging machines. That wasn't routine offboarding anymore. That was the company preparing to prove something in a way that could survive court. For the first time since Mark said the word replaceable, I felt something like a small internal shift. Not hope, certainty. Because legal holds don't happen for rumors. They happen for patterns, for inconsistencies, for trails that don't line up. And then Daniel said something that made my throat tighten. Not with fear, with a kind of grim validation. You were right to call this a cover, he said. Your termination timing is notable. I sat down again, slower this time. What do you need from me? I asked. 2 things, he said. First, keep your notes exactly as they are. Don't rewrite them. Don't clean them up. Original's best. Done, I said. Second, he added, I need you to come in tomorrow for an interview. Voluntary but recorded. Legal will be present. Legal. That word used to sound like distance. Now it sounded like gravity. Okay, I said. I'll be there. After the call ended, I stared at my kitchen wall for a long time. Then my phone buzzed again. A new text. Unknown number. This is corporate security. We detected an attempted password reset on your company identity profile at 6:12 p.m. If this was not you, reply, no. I typed one word, no. And for the first time all night, I felt it. Sharp, clean, undeniable. That night, I stopped being the guy who got fired. I became the guy who remembered everything. Because someone had tried to erase me from the trail, and they'd just admitted, without meaning to, that I was the trail. I looked at the case number Daniel gave me, then at the original note I wrote right after the call. Terminated 4:17 p.m. Mark present, replaceable. I underlined the time twice. Tomorrow I'd walk into that building without a badge. But I wouldn't be walking in powerless, and I didn't know it yet. But by the time I left that interview, the chaos would already be starting. I showed up the next morning without a badge, which is a strange kind of humiliation when you've walked into the same building for over a decade. Security didn't make me wait in the lobby, though. A different guard met me at the entrance, checked my ID, and walked me straight to a small conference room on the 2nd floor. The kind with frosted glass and a camera in the corner you pretend not to notice. Daniel was there. So was corporate security. And the legal. Legal wasn't one person, it was 2. An in-house counsel and an outside attorney, who didn't introduce himself like he expected me to be comfortable. He introduced himself like he expected this to end up as evidence. They put a recorder on the table. They read me an advisement. They asked if I consented. I said yes. Not because I trusted them, because I wanted a clean, permanent record of what I'd been saying since the minute Mark called me replaceable. We started with basics, my role, my permissions, the approval workflow, how expedite invoices came to me, what documentation I required before I signed anything. Then the in-house counsel slid a printed timeline across the table. Not a summary, not bullet points. A minute-by-minute activity log. Walk us through anything here you don't recognize, she said. I leaned in, and the air left my lungs. The vendor banking change request, Northgate's new account, showed my approval at 6:09 p.m. on a Thursday last month. Except the log also showed something else. At 6:05 p.m., my MFA method was changed. At 6:07 p.m., a password reset was initiated. At 6:08 p.m., a new recovery phone number was added. At 6:09 p.m., the approval was completed. I tapped the paper once, hard. That wasn't me, I said. I was at my sister's place that night. I didn't even have my laptop. Corporate security nodded like he'd already decided that part. "We know," he said. "Your badge didn't enter the building. Your VPN wasn't active. No known device fingerprint matches yours." He pointed to a line on the page. "But we do have a device." He slid another sheet over. It was an endpoint identifier, asset tag, machine name, login session, the kind of detail only security cares about. The outside attorney finally spoke. "That machine was in the building," he said. "On your floor." My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed level. "Whose machine?" I asked. The security lead looked at Daniel, then back to me. "It's assigned to procurement," he said, a junior analyst. But the session that initiated the change used elevated admin privileges, temporary elevation issued by IT service desk. That wasn't normal. Temporary elevation is the kind of thing you request when you need to fix something urgent. It's tracked, it's approved, it leaves a trail. The in-house counsel asked, "Do you know anyone in procurement who would have had a reason to do this?" I didn't even pretend to think. "Mark," I said, and for the first time since I walked in, something shifted in the room. It wasn't confirmation, it was momentum, like everyone had been circling the same drain, and my answer finally gave them permission to go straight down. They asked about the expedite approvals again. I explained the pressure, the late-day messages, the approve now docs later routine. I told them I asked for SOWs and service logs. I told them I documented the gaps. Then I handed them what I brought, my original notes, the forwarded calendar invites, and the screenshot of the recovery options alert that hit after my termination. No speeches, no outrage, just facts. The outside attorney took one look at my handwritten line, "Mark says approve now, docs later," and asked, "Why did you write this down?" I stared at him for a beat. "Because I've seen how people rewrite history when money's involved," I said. That landed. They took a break. 10 minutes, maybe 15. When they came back, Daniel's tone was different. Faster, sharper. "Payments to Northgate have been frozen," he said. "Treasury is working with the bank to recall what's still recallable. Vendor master data has been locked, and a legal hold went out this morning to Mark's team." A clean wave of relief hit my chest. Small, but real. Not victory, not yet, but the first consequence. Then security added, "Mark's access was suspended at 9:12 a.m. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just felt my shoulders loosen for the first time in 2 days. Because that one action meant they weren't protecting him anymore. They were containing him. The in-house counsel looked at me and asked the question I'd been waiting for since Tuesday. "Did Mark ever indicate you were being terminated for performance?" "No," I said. "He called it restructuring. Then he called me replaceable. That was the whole explanation." She nodded and wrote something down. Then Daniel said, "We also have evidence of attempted password resets on your profile last night after your termination." I looked up. "From where?" I asked. Security pushed his laptop forward just enough for me to see a line item. Timestamp, internal IP, building subnet, same floor, same building, same pattern, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because if they were still trying to get into my identity after firing me, it meant they weren't done using my name. The outside attorney closed his folder. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You will not contact Mark. You will not contact anyone involved. If anyone contacts you, you document it and notify us. Understood?" "Understood," I said. They walked me out through a side corridor like I was carrying something fragile. Maybe I was. As I stepped into the cold air outside, my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. They just escorted Mark out. He didn't look angry, he looked scared. I read it twice. And for a brief second, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since this started. That night, I stopped being the easy target. They thought firing me would make the trail go quiet. Instead, it turned the lights on. But I didn't know it yet. There was still one piece they hadn't found, and Mark was going to try to use it before he lost everything. By Friday, the company had stopped feeling like a workplace and started feeling like a crime scene. People spoke in half sentences. Meetings got canceled without explanation. Senior leaders who used to walk fast and loud suddenly moved like they were trying not to be noticed. And my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Not with gossip, with the kind of careful, coded messages people send when they're afraid every screen is being watched. Maya texted once more. Northgate is locked. Procurement is being interviewed. Mark's calendar is wiped. Then a second message a few minutes later. He's telling people you went rogue. I stared at that line for a long time. Because of course he was. If Mark couldn't erase the trail, he'd try to poison it. Make me look unstable, resentful, vindictive. Make my notes look like a grudge instead of documentation. And if I'd walked out of that termination call screaming or threatening or crying, he would have had it. A perfect little clip, a narrative. But I hadn't given him that. So he was improvising. Daniel called me late that afternoon. His tone was no longer gentle. He didn't need to be. We were past comfort. We're closing the loop, he said. We got the service desk elevation approvals. My heart beat once, hard. And? I asked. Daniel paused, like he was choosing language carefully. The temporary admin elevations were requested under a manager's authority, he said. Mark's? I exhaled slowly. Not relief. Focus. Signed off how? I asked. Through a self-service manager workflow, Daniel replied. It logs identity, device, and IP. And we have the request metadata. Meaning, not hearsay, not assumption. Evidence. What happens now? I asked. Now legal takes it, Daniel said. But there's one more step we needed. Northgate isn't just a vendor, it's linked. Linked to what? I asked. Linked to a shell entity, he said. We traced the updated bank account. Beneficiary name is a holding company registered out of state. Same registered agent used in 2 other suspicious vendor setups. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't Mark cutting corners. This wasn't pressure. This was orchestration. Is Mark tied to it? I asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately, and that silence told me they were looking at something bigger than my termination. We can't accuse until we confirm, he said. But we found something in his emails. My throat tightened. I don't have access, I said. You don't need it, Daniel replied. Legal hold preserved everything, he continued. 2 weeks before your termination, Mark sent an email to procurement and finance ops. We need the final approvals cleaned up before month-end review. Then he forwarded a spreadsheet called Northgate Cleanup. Cleanup? I pictured Mark's smile on the call. Comfortable. Fed. I asked the question I hadn't asked yet because part of me didn't want to know. Did he plan to make it look like me? I said. Daniel didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, he said. The intent appears to be shifting approval accountability to you and then removing you before the audit trail was examined. My hands went cold again, the same way they did when he said replaceable. But this time the cold didn't feel like shock. It felt like clarity. Do you have what you need? I asked. Daniel's voice softened just a notch. We do, he said. And because you stayed calm, because you documented, because you didn't retaliate, your statement is consistent with the technical evidence. Consistent. That's the word people use when the story locks into place. 2 days later, I got an email, not to my company account, to my personal one. From the in-house counsel, it was short, formal. They were placing me on paid administrative leave retroactive to my termination date, while the investigation finalized, and they were offering a separation conversion option, reinstatement in good standing, or a negotiated exit package with non-disparagement and cooperation language. In normal times, that kind of email would feel like a win. But what hit me hardest was one sentence near the bottom. Your termination has been deemed procedurally improper and is under review. Mark didn't just lose his narrative, he lost the cover. A week later, Maya called me, actual call, not text. She sounded exhausted. They walked him out again, she said, this time with a box, and the outside investigators were here. Not just audit. Outside investigators. That means the company wasn't handling it quietly anymore. What are people saying? I asked. Maya laughed once, bitter. They're saying the word fraud out loud now, she said. and they're saying your name like you're the reason it stopped. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Deep tired. The kind you get when you realize you almost got buried under someone else's plan. A few days after that, Daniel sent me one final message. No corporate language, no formality, just a single line. They found the missing piece. The bank recalls worked. The board is involved now. I sat in my kitchen again, same table, same silence, and thought about that Tuesday, about Mark's smile, about his line. You're replaceable. Here's what he didn't understand. In a company obsessed with controls and compliance, the most dangerous thing you can do is try to replace a person by erasing the record of what they touched. Because the record doesn't disappear. It just waits for someone to look. And when the review triggered, it didn't expose me. It exposed him. I took the exit package, not because I was scared, because I didn't want to stay in a place where a manager could weaponize my identity, and the company's first instinct was to read a script. The package covered a full year of pay, benefits extension, and a neutral reference clause. My attorney negotiated the language. I signed nothing I didn't understand. And the last thing I asked for, non-negotiable, was a written confirmation of rehire eligible status in my file. They gave it to me. When I finally shut my laptop that night, the apartment felt quiet in a way it hadn't all week. Not empty, peaceful. Because the story didn't end with me getting fired. It ended with the people who called me replaceable, learning what happens when you try to use someone as a scapegoat in a system built to track every move. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. And in the end, the most satisfying part wasn't revenge. It was watching the truth walk in, calm, documented, and impossible to argue with.